Mr. Timmers, you were the Director of Cybersecurity in the EU Commission. What is the current collaboration concerning cybersecurity looks like?
A lot has been happening over the past few years. So initially in 2012 there was not much collaboration, and people were also not very willing because they thought it was all about national security. Since that time there was a European cybersecurity strategy, and we introduced also a law, the Network and Information Security Directive, which is for the critical service providers to collaborate in case there is a big incident, and also for national authorities to work together. And that actually really starts working. We saw it when there was the WannaCry incident in 2017. People actually activated that network. This is a technical network and a strategic network. So two types of collaborations are going on. And so now when I read about it, people are actually very positive that this is possible and the collaboration is starting to function. It's always a challenge because you need to have people working together from quite different countries, different practices, perhaps different levels of sophistication. But I'm rather optimistic about this form of collaboration.
Okay, and is cybersecurity also a topic that affects the European election, which is taking place at the moment? Are there special measures which were taken prior to the election in order to avoid manipulation?
In fact, it's very much a topic in the European elections. There were great concerns that fake news, the manipulation of social media, perhaps by certain interest groups or by certain countries, would start affecting the European elections. And there were strong warnings, and also a policy has been put in place by the European Commission to start working together with the private sector, because it's after all the private sector of this world, Facebook for example, is running the social media, to take out fake news, to bring down those that are having fake accounts. For a long time the European Commission was not very happy about it, and has certainly been putting a lot of pressure on the large companies to do more. Today some kind of status assessment is being made up. A lot of fake news is taken out, but not everything. So it's still not perfect, and there's still a great concern that it can affect the European elections. Nevertheless, the first indications at this moment in time are that it is less systematic. A lot is happening, but it is perhaps less systematic as we have seen in previous elections. We have to be a bit careful, because after these elections we will have to assess, and it will be assessed, how much was now the influence of cyber distortion, you might say, fake news, during the elections, and it will continue. It's not only these elections, but also in other debates that are happening across all of Europe and national elections. So let's be a bit careful about being optimistic. It continues to be a great concern. It was certainly an issue in these elections.
Okay, you just mentioned fake news. Are there any other risks concerning cybersecurity at the moment in the EU?
Yeah, if you also listen to the stories here, there is such an enormous number of attacks. Someone was mentioning that malware is growing explosively, and indeed between 2016 and 2018 the number of malwares on Android, on the mobile phones, on the handies, has been growing by a factor of 10, which is huge, enormous, and we are all at risk. 2% of all apps on Android are malware of nasty nature. We are spending over 3, 4, 5 hours a day actually using our mobile phones, so we are vulnerable. So the rise of malware on mobile phones is one of the biggest risks that we see. Secondly, there is a great concern that at some moment infrastructure, critical infrastructure, can be attacked, and we can see devastating effects. We have already seen some of those happening, and it was devastating, like the WannaCry incident, where there were 20,000 people in the UK who couldn't get to the hospital and have their medical appointment. Apparently people have died actually because of that. This was large scale, but the fear is that at some moment in time it may hit at even larger scale. Therefore, all of this collaboration around cyber resilience, about risk management, about making sure that our critical infrastructures, including, for example, health, continue to run.
And talking about risks, where is, in your opinion, the greatest need for action from the EU?
I think the EU can be really a positive example for collaborating internationally. I think we have done it successfully, setting an example with the General Data Protection Regulation on data protection. That's taken as an example by many countries in the world and creates also a willingness to work together with Europe. Likewise, people are now talking about the attitude that Europe takes in cybersecurity. We have the Network and Information Security Directive, we have a Cyber Act. They could be meeting places, let's formulate it carefully, where people internationally can meet and say, well, this actually makes sense how the Europeans thought about it. Let's do this together internationally. So that can be one form, and another form, I think, which is where Europe can play an important role. In Europe, we have always been much in favor of open source approaches, open and sharing approaches. And that could be a very good way to safeguard and protect certain parts of the internet, for example, the public core of the internet. We should consider that as a global common good. And Europe is probably quite open, quite sympathetic to that, because it fits in a certain sense to the collaborative mentality that we have in Europe.